Right, welcome back to the Scout Report, guys, on TF3. This week I'm delighted to be joined by Bundesliga Correspondent for Fox, Ross Dunbar. Ross, welcome.
Thanks for having me again, Adam.
Thanks for coming on. We are here to talk about Musa Dembele, one of the hottest prospects in Europe, tearing it up at Celtic right now. 29 goals this season. Just how impressive has this guy been this season, Ross?
I think you summed it up well when you said tearing it up, because he's been an absolute revelation this year, and especially when you consider the fact that Celtic got him for £500,000. I mean, I don't think you'll find a better bargain than that, especially when it comes to the sell-on price. But I mean, certainly from the people that I've spoken to at clubs, I don't think there is a European club right now that probably wouldn't want to have him because he's still so young. I saw N'Golo Kante talking about the fact that he wants to see him in the French national team. So if you can imagine his potential over the next 2 or 3 years, this is a guy who's going to be one of the top forwards in European football, I think, so long as he picks the right club. And that's the big caveat. You don't want him to go to a club where he doesn't play. And that's happened quite a lot when players leave Scotland. They go to clubs where maybe they're the second option. I think it's important for him to hit the ground running at his next club and certainly be playing every week rather than being on the bench.
Where would you like to see him go next season? Where do you think is the best move? Because as you say, the likes of Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, Chelsea are being linked with this guy. Where do you think is the best move potentially for Musa Dembele?
I think certainly going back to the Premier League would be an obvious one, because he's coming from England, obviously not playing in the Premier League, but understands the English game. So I think certainly the physical aspect won't surprise him too much. I can look at Arsenal, Chelsea, Manchester United in a couple of years possibly will need that kind of striker. Outside of that, there's obviously the attraction of PSG or Marseille with the new money that they have. Obviously, if he wants to improve his hopes of being a French international, then you would imagine being at PSG or Marseille would certainly strengthen his chances. But I would also look at Borussia Dortmund, because this year, perhaps with Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang leaving, which I think will be pretty likely, he's the kind of guy who I think has shown at Champions League level, especially against Man City, against Mönchengladbach, that he could go into that kind of team. And I actually think, without sounding outrageous, I actually think he would be a better fit to Dortmund's style than Aubameyang, because Aubameyang is a guy who's got great pace, but Dembele actually brings other players into the game. And I think if you actually look at his stats at Celtic, okay, he scored a lot of goals in all competitions, but in the league, he's only scored 15 goals in 24 games. It's not outrageous. It's not a ridiculous amount of goals in a poor league. I think what makes him so unique is actually that his combination play is so good. And I've watched a lot of Dortmund this season, and although Aubameyang has got a fantastic goal record and finishes off a lot of chances, I think there's other players in that team who could have their qualities maybe brought out a little bit more by someone like Dembele. And I think that's what maybe would make him more attractive to Dortmund. And then you have Bayern Munich, who are definitely in the market for a second striker. They've been in the market for at least 5 years for a second striker. It's hard to get a guy who knows that Lewandowski never gets injured and scores about 50 goals a season. So they're probably looking for a player as well. And I think going to a market like Scotland for a guy who might cost you 15 million might be the most sensible thing to do.
I mean, it does sound like it would be a good move. It would be certainly an interesting move for Dortmund and for Dembele. Another interesting move would be if he did end up going to Chelsea, which is the club who are being linked from on the back pages of the British press right now. 40 million is the reported fee that Chelsea are considering offering to Celtic. Do you think potentially with Diego Costa maybe off to China this summer, that move seems to have been delayed until the end of the season, that Dembele could be the man to fill the void left by Diego Costa?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, like we said, I mean, Dembele has that kind of familiarity with the English football, and he understands that, the physical aspect of it's really important, and certainly playing in Scotland, he'll have been able to develop that. So it's not like he's left England and gone to maybe Holland or to Germany, where you maybe don't have to deal with that. And we also know the style of player that Diego Costa is. Perhaps Dembele's picked up a few tricks being in Scotland, so that might help. But again, you're looking at centre forwards in the market, and I think Arsene Wenger has said this before, that European football doesn't produce a lot of great number nines. I can only think of a couple right now. Kevin Gamero, Atletico Madrid, possibly an option. But Dembele is one of very, very few who I think could go into any of those top teams and really enhance their game. He does have that kind of aggression that you have from South American players, but he also has the tactical side of things. You see the way that he played with Celtic in the Champions League. He could play in a position where, if you look at the way Antonio Conte plays, Diego Costa has to lead the line because they have a really solid defence and they need an outball. They need someone who can hold the ball in. bring other players into the game, and I think Dembele could do that. The price tag of 40 million, though, I'm not so sure about. I mean, you've got to bear in mind that we're talking about Scottish League, and I don't want to. I'm not going to talk down about Scottish football, obviously, but I think you have to be realistic that people will look at what he does in the Scottish Premiership and think, yeah, well, it's a one-team league, so it doesn't really matter much. What was really important for Dembele is what he does in the Champions League, and he did really, really well in the group stages, especially against Man City and against Mönchengladbach, where he scored. So I think maybe half that price, 20 million, 25 million possibly, and I think that's more of a fair value for him.
It sounds like an absolute bargain. I mean, it makes sense for these clubs to be interested in Dembele when that is the potential price tag. Do you think it makes sense for him as a player, though? Do you think he needs another season in the Scottish Premier League to get more games under his belt, more experience, or do you think this is the time to move on to one of those bigger clubs?
I think that could really benefit him because the key thing is that he's working under a great manager at Brendan Rodgers. I mean, Rodgers has gone up there and has really turned things around from last season with Celtic, so I can't see any harm in him staying another year. I mean, it looks like he's going to win 3 domestic trophies this season. If he gets another shot at the Champions League, that can only enhance his value, and Celtic are in a position of real power because Dembele's under contract until 2020. So Celtic don't have to sell him now. You can wait maybe 2 years before the contract ends before you then think about selling him. And if Dembele goes into the Champions League again next season, perhaps he's in a more competitive league with Rangers and Aberdeen stronger. That might help his value, and it's a difficult situation for Celtic because they've probably got people offering them 20, 25 million. Do they take it, or do they kind of bide their time and let's see his development grow naturally? I think he would probably benefit from having one more year in Scotland. He's still 20 years old, so I don't think there's any rush in going to a big club because, like I said at the start, if he goes to Chelsea and Diego Costa doesn't leave and he plays 20, 30 games, then he might not get a lot of game time, and that's the real key thing. I don't think there's a lot of breeding grounds like Celtic, where you have 60,000 people every week, you have a great manager, you have the Champions League football. I think he should be patient and give it another season and see what he is at the end of next year. Perhaps being in the French national team will enhance his value as well.
It remains to be seen what happens. It's going to be very interesting. I mean, call me biased. Personally, I'd like to see him turn up at Spurs. You know, the deal was on the table there. It almost happened. It sort of broke down. He ended up going to Celtic. But maybe he can provide some real competition for Harry Kane next season or the season after. It remains to be seen. For now, though, Ross, thank you so much for coming on TF3. Where can the viewers find more of you?
You can follow me on Twitter at Ross Dunbar 93. But thanks again for having me. It's a great pleasure talking to you.